Okay, so I don't know why this came up, and I don't know how this happened, but for the past couple hours, I'm just looking at Star Wars clips and, from the movies I've seen and also from Clone Wars, and I've come to the conclusion that there's a huge, huge paradox concerning the Star Wars timeline. And it's something I've always felt and believed, but was never able to prove. You see, I grew up where there was no apprentice for Anakin Skywalker. Darth Maul died. There was nothing to do with Darth Maul building an empire. Nothing with an apprentice at all for Anakin. And that's the timeline I grew up in. And then, of course, stuff came afterwards to contradict that and say that no, Anakin had an apprentice, Ahsoka Tano. But seeing the movies and then seeing the animated, it doesn't make any sense. So I've come across something very, very interesting. And it's the fact that Anakin killed Dooku in Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. And he also killed Dooku in Clone Wars. But the timeline in Clone Wars is completely different. So it can't be the same universe. It's impossible because in the Clone Wars, Anakin is with Yoda, and Yoda yells at Anakin not to kill Dooku when they're battling Darth Sidious. And he kills Dooku anyway, and they go on to fight Darth Sidious. And this is another battle that contradicts Revenge of the Sith, Yoda meeting Darth Sidious for the first time. Because according to Clone Wars, he met him there in battle. So my theory is that at some point in time, the Star Wars timeline was altered to where everything we see today is the secondary timeline. Where the Solo movie, the Ahsoka, the Ben Kenobi and Darth Vader battles on Ben Kenobi series, the Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett, even the Force Awakens, the Last Jedi, and the Rise of Skywalker is all part of that secondary timeline. Now you could say, no, that's not true. Well, it is because the Clone Wars animated directly contradicts Revenge of the Sith totally, and the movies contradict the animated totally. So my question is, what is wrong with the fact that there are two timelines? Like, why does Disney and Lucas want to say there's one timeline when it's impossible? And I will go on to say that the secondary timeline would basically shape a different timeline for the future. Because if there was an alteration at a key point in the past, then Star Wars Empire and Jedi would not happen the way it does. So the weirdest thing is, I believe The Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker are now part of the secondary timeline, but it doesn't add up because the key changes to the past would mean that Star Wars Empire and Jedi would not happen exactly the way it happened, meaning that there will be another timeline created. So the key factor could be that there are multiple timelines, more than two, maybe three, because somebody with the Force is able to keep traveling back to the past and is making a mess. Now, the fact that Darth Maul, and they tried to like weave it where it fits perfectly, where Darth Maul gets killed by Obi-Wan in Clone Wars. But none of it makes sense. Like, none of it adds up because the Anakin we see in the movies is so erratic and anger-filled that he couldn't possibly train anyone because he's not trained himself. And the fact that he's always trying to control his emotions and Ben Kenobi's trying to work with him so he could be on the Jedi Council and stuff like that, and like to be a master, like meaning that he's on the Jedi Council, but to be a master, like to become the title of master. Like, it just seems to me that there's something that's missing that pinpoints it all together. So the problem is that there's always the rule of two, that there can only be a master and apprentice of the Sith. And I always had a problem with that because I'm like, there's no way that could ever work out, and there's always going to be contradictions. There's always going to be a way where they tried to break the rule without breaking the rule. Because it just makes absolutely no sense how that could be. And you got to think about it, like, who defends that rule? What if the Sith just don't defend that rule? Like, what if, like, there's a Sith that just trains someone else and they just don't go by it? How would the other Sith know about it? I don't... Which could mean that there's two different types of Sith. And again, like, every single thing we've always seen more than two Sith, and then they try to explain it away, and don't explain it away. There's just no rule of two. Just get rid of that. But it seems to me that there's just maybe it's the Doctor who, pardon me, that's looking for paradox, but it basically shows there's a paradox. It shows that Dooku got killed by Anakin at two different points in time, at two different places, with different people around him. First time, the real time, no one was around him. He was with, Senator Palpatine, and he killed Dooku. The second time, in Clone Wars, which I'm very surprised that the writers just blatantly paradox the whole goddamn universe. I mean, do you want to say it's bad writing and then you want to make an excuse that no, there's no way it could be the same timeline. There's absolutely no way that Star Wars and Clone Wars are the same timeline compared to the movies. Like, all of them together, they do not add up. There is no way possible. So I try to think, well, what was changed in the past that would create a whole totally different timeline? And the answer is, it all goes back to Ahsoka. That he never met Ahsoka, and that due to something changed in the past, he met Ahsoka. But then this timeline is completely different. And there's no way it could actually, with her existing and Darth Maul still living, there's no way that the Time Lord could weave in to perfectly fit Star Wars Empire Jedi exactly without any changes to the timeline. There's impossible. The fact that he doesn't think, I mean, she doesn't exist in Revenge of the Sith. Doesn't think about her at all. All he thinks about is Padme. Doesn't care about. You would think that if he's on the path to the dark side, he'd be thinking about all the people he cares about. But the main people he would care about is Padme and Ahsoka, because Ahsoka's like a friend. So he would have her on his brain, too. No, she doesn't exist. But then she does exist in Clone Wars. And you may say, oh, it's animated. Well, no, it's not, because you can't just say it's a different universe because it's animated, because they're making the animated universe real, and it weaves into the live action, which is impossible. See, they always tried to make a rule to break the rule of two with the Sith. And they introduced these characters called the Inquisitors and different people just to say that there's somebody with a lightsaber or somebody just to break the damn friggin' rule. How about just get rid of the rule? They just don't go by it. As much as they try to, it just gets turned off because it just doesn't make sense. Think about the video games, and they count that as canon too, or they don't. Like, I mean, it's very easy to say, oh, it's no longer canon, it is canon. So